Hello, my dear viewers. I'm Olga Demchuk, a researcher of the inner self. See this t-shirt I'm wearing today? There's a little cat and it's surrounded by piranhas. And the topic of our video will be all about this little cat. This is a drawing by Tatiana Smriga. You all know her from the book covers. She's an artist from Uzhhorod, and she gave me this shirt with her original artwork on it. So last Friday, we talked about wanting to be a kind, smart, calm, and rational person. And today, let's try to dive deeper into being rational and calm. This video, as you've already read in the title, is called That's Your Madness, Baby. People have a rather peculiar relationship with what goes on in their inner world. Many people simply can't calmly, like researchers, observe these processes and get to know them. Because survival mode is always based on judgment. Meaning, if I discover something about myself, I have to immediately label it as either right and good or wrong and bad. And depending on that, I have an emotional reaction to that aspect of myself. And since there's this judgment, there's also self-aggression. And that's why we're forbidden from acknowledging many aspects of ourselves. They remain in our blind spots. And these blind spots, these often unrecognized aspects, they still emerge and become noticeable in reality. And the person realizes something is wrong with them, but they can't accept their real self just as they are. And specifically today, we're going to talk about madness. And as an example, let's take our interactions with people. If we draw a straight line, then on one end, we'll have something like, I have difficulty connecting with other people. I'm unsociable. And on the other end of this line, we'll have, I'm outgoing and it's easy for me to connect even with strangers. And many people, to explain this trait to themselves, label themselves as an introvert on this side of the line or as an extrovert. And they say, well, I'm just an introvert. That is, it's impossible to perceive oneself more deeply and complexly, and one wants to stick on a label that explains everything. I'm just an introvert. The same labels can be applied to psychology when they say there, you have a trauma, rejection, and that's why you are unsociable. Or do you have increased need for attention and therefore you're sociable? It's as if a complex system with established cause and effect relationships is too much to handle, and then these gaps in these relationships are filled with these simple explanations that don't make things any clearer. And the scariest thing about this is that it's like sentence. That is, the person does not even delve into it and does not try to understand and change this moment. Let's take, for example, introverts. That is, those who have problems with contact with people. This specificity can be due to many reasons. For example, I feel a very strong hunger, a very strong dependence on others. It's a need so powerful that if I do create psycho-emotional contact with another person, then in this contact, I immediately lose myself. I immediately begin to adapt, to please, and my individuality evaporates. And then the human psyche, in trying to compensate for this psychological feature, creates a kind of safety cushion between itself and other people. That is, we are not talking about the impossibility of contact, but about the fear of contact. And if I don't work with my madness, with my hunger, then I have to be in excessive tension all the time, so as not to enter into this complete fusion with the cancellation of myself. Now, if I know this about myself, about this specificity, and I don't deny it, don't disown it, then I begin to work with this hunger, just like on this t-shirt. This is one of my piranhas. Why do I say that this is madness? Because it is not being updated on a regular basis. That is, a person cannot control it by any individual means. And this unsociability, this fear of making contact, creates problems for a person. That is, if the personality sits down and calmly reflects, perhaps taking a moment to consider that I was too constrained, even limited at this particularly important and significant meeting, and recognizes that this was genuinely detrimental to what I wanted to create in this contact, then it will start to change it. She realizes this. And in the moment of realization, when this madness kicks in, when it has now taken me captive, I understand this specific trait of mine, and so before a meeting, I will think not about how to say the right thing from a script, but about how I can manage not to be consumed by this madness. So it's one of the piranhas that seems to swallow the personality whole. If a person doesn't understand themselves, doesn't understand their madness, they can create entire legends around their madness. And these legends, it's as if they change the very fabric of the world. Meaning, the person cannot admit that they have this specific trait or this problem, and they start explaining it to themselves by saying that people are dangerous, people are bad. And this danger of other people isn't because they are dangerous specifically to me, but as a marker, people are dangerous. You see, when we are honest with ourselves, when we call things by their proper names, we get the opportunity not only to avoid being captive, but also to change something. Now let's take the opposite, a person who just goes into contact. And this person can just go into contact because they enjoy the power that they have. They feel like a fish in water, and in order not to face any internal doubts, they practically have scripts written, meaning they don't distinguish between faces. They talk to everyone about the same topics, they behave in the exact same way with everyone. And a person who isn't observing them and doesn't see that they talk to everyone this way might feel special that they were approached and that this is how they are being spoken to. And when we talk about this person as an extrovert, it would be good to understand what is behind this screen. Or the person has so much anxiety that it consumes them into non-existence that they need to be excessive, they need to be reflected by someone. And this is a violent form of communication, and afterwards I feel exhausted, as if someone is pushing me, saying, "Come on, talk," as if it's unbearable to be in silence. You see, we really can't say that those people who are distant from others, who are in general unsociable, and those who communicate are healthy, both are sick. So we are all, to some extent, mad. Let me repeat, by madness I mean the inappropriateness of this behavior in a given moment, behavior that primarily harms the person themselves. And when I realize that I'm forcing myself into this communication, that I'm putting pressure on myself in some way, I can say, this is my madness. And this will help me to gradually break out of this script where my own madness rolls out before me like a red carpet, or as if it is laying down tracks on which I will simply roll along without really having full control over what I am doing. The word madness is burdened by the context of that judgment, of that inability to look at things directly, to see the word madness as a simple statement of fact. Now let's look at activity also at these two poles. For example, a person who is in a state of depression, and depression is an endless attack on oneself by the ideal self, which demands that the person create a world in their own name. In this state, there is no energy. All the energy is spent on these internal attacks, these internal processes. And a person, by choosing this diagnosis, for example, I have depression, and treating the depression, even if they take pills for depression, it's as if they've explained everything to themselves. But has it given them an understanding of what to do with themselves? If I understand that I'm prone to depressiveness, I start working on my self-aggression, because that is the cause. Or I start to change my perception of the world and understand that the world is different from my idealistic view of it. And when I lash out at myself with self-aggression, I understand this is my madness. I can feel it grinding in my teeth. You know, like when you're on the beach eating sandwiches and a gust of wind blows and they're all covered in sand. And you eat those sandwiches and feel the sand crunching between your teeth. It's exactly the same when you understand your tendencies, understand the piranhas around you. You can then stop yourself. Because madness has an incredible allure. Just like, for example, excessive activity. Many people don't understand what inspires them, why they are so excessively active. For example, someone might become excessively active for another person. They choose them as a mother or as the one. And the activity essentially becomes a sacrifice for the other person. And then a huge dependence on praise develops, or on getting something in return for the other person to give you something for it. Or, for example, the desire to give advice. That's also madness when it's inappropriate, when you're not asked for it. When you do it, and after you've done it, you realize that something is not right. The person themselves even realizes, it just clicks that it's inappropriate. And most often, it's as if external reality tells us this is inappropriate. And at that moment, it's very difficult to admit that I was just being mad, that I was not synchronized with reality. Instead, you want to blame the other person or the world, that they are somehow wrong and you are right. And that is the danger of madness, that legends are invented for it. It gets covered in explanatory constructs that prevent the person from changing, but instead allow them to explain to themselves, I'm fine, I'm fine. Or let's take, for example, these endless conversations in your head and attacks on someone else. You know, it's pleasant to beat someone up inside. They're silent, and we're in our heads proving something to them, making arguments, remembering how they acted. And if at that moment we say, this is madness, we will stop. We won't be carried away because we must remain grounded in reality. Because in madness, we don't feel the constraints and boundaries of reality that normally keep us anchored. For example, my conviction that I'm right, that's madness, because I don't know for sure what the reality is. I can guess, but if I'm completely certain, there's no barrier from reality. I don't get stopped by it, and I can keep developing this sense of being right more and more and more. And I end up distorting what actually happens so much that it becomes unbearably difficult to go back to the point where I started lying to myself about something. So we have considered 3 points. The point about contact with people, when you realize you have these mad aspects in how you build that contact. You know, these peculiarities of yours. And so when you enter into contact, you'll know for sure that you might, as they say, do something crazy. And you'll have a heightened awareness. A heightened awareness, for example, of the desire to idealize someone, or conversely, the desire to devalue someone. It's like keeping your hand on your own pulse and always knowing how many beats per minute your heart is making. In other words, all these automatic reactions, all our habitual patterns, they don't require any effort or reflection from us. And there's never a choice. A person doesn't think, doesn't choose. Should I speak now or not? Should I be silent now or not? Do I even need contact with this person or not? There is no choice and no sense of appropriateness. So we have this person in this drawing, it's actually a cat, a feline character, and they are either inside their own madness, that is, the personality as a slave to its various madnesses, those madnesses that come from the past, from earlier experiences, something, what they've memorized over time, what they've learned for some reason or another. These are things that have been stored away in their mind, things that have become part of who they are, shaping their behavior and thoughts in ways they might not even realize. They're like a machine with a program that completely predetermines their fate. Because there is no doubt the madness hasn't been named as madness. And I'm either inside it, like trapped in a spider web, or I'm outside it, when I don't deny it and try to do something about it, to do something about my fear of people, or more precisely, my fear of entering into ambiguous relationships that will later be impossible to end. Or I do something about my excessive talkativeness, where I blurt out things I'd rather hide about myself, for example, because I wanted to be an interesting conversationalist. The same goes for my activity. If I start getting carried away, when I have a lot of abundant energy, am I not just perhaps serving some object I've chosen as a mother figure, bringing offerings to her feet? And besides understanding that this is madness, baby, you need to treat your madness with respect. I often hear in groups and in personal analysis people say, "Oh, I thought I had worked through that." As if you could, work through a scar from an appendectomy, for example, or a worked through birthmark, right? Or a worked through person's height. The last thing people want to accept is that this is a given. And many people who could be helped by medication refuse it, because then they would have to admit that they are, in fact, insane. It's a form of resistance, a struggle against reality, telling yourself, no, I can handle this on my own. It's like fighting an addiction, like denying you have a sleeping problem or denying you have issues with food. Eventually, it catches up with you, and then you feel immense shame for having relapsed into that madness. But as it was approaching, you didn't recognize it because you don't know it. You're not familiar with it. You don't understand yourself. When we talk about these insane, inappropriate, and involuntary aspects, that is, automatic behaviors that activate for no clear reason, there's always a distinguishing feature. As I mentioned earlier, there's no resistance. It's a kind of natural action, done without thought and without choice. And there's always an element of gimme, I want it, gimme, 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 I want it, an element of I'm scared, of it hurts, and of anger, you're bad. It's hard for us to recognize anger, our own anger. Instead, we most often feel that we're in pain, that things aren't how we want them to be. And all these emotional moments, they indicate that our subjectivity has been activated. The world of me has switched on. My own coordinate system has engaged. And in fact, in order for me to change, it's not about working through something. It's as if I need to change the entire coordinate system I live in. A system where I can say, that was not normal. And you'd agree when you have someone you trust and you tell them something and they say, that's not normal, something is not right about that. And that can be a sobering experience. It would be good for us to have that kind of sobering moment as well. In particular, at the webinar on March 29th, we'll talk about this abnormality in business. How a person seems to be focused on their self-realization and earning money, but is actually building bizarre relationships with their work, their colleagues, their managers, or their subordinates. I would like to remind you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you support us and our work. All of our projects are on the website. However, only some of them are currently available in English, and as always, I'll ask you to leave a comment below the video. Which of your own madnesses have you already acknowledged? Which of your own madnesses have you learned to live with? What madness do you know so well that you can cater to it without a loss in your quality of life? Well, for example, I'll share my own madness with you. For instance, I always leave food out for myself at night, sliced apples or a peeled orange, because I know my madness will wake me up in the middle of the night feeling hungry. And if I don't prepare something beforehand, something other than candy, then I won't be able to handle it. It will lead me to the fridge, and then I'll start eating everything in sight. But this way, I have the opportunity to not ignore my own madness, and at the same time, not become its slave. So, please write. I'll say goodbye. See you next time.